So here we go. Welcome to session 18 at the 2026 International Conference of Autoethnography. And with me today in the writer's chair is Andrew Gillott, author of Writing Sensation. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you, Kitrina.
And where are you speaking from today?
I am speaking from a very gorgeously sunny northeast Aberdeen. But obviously this room is not gorgeously sunny, and I apologise for that. It's because this place is gorgeous, sunny, and very poorly connected to the internet. So I can't go out and get a signal. So I'm locking myself away in this room for a conversation with you.
Sounds very good. You can at least be nice and cool.
Yeah, it is so gorgeous out there, and I just did have my first cup of coffee of the day in the harbour. And
Nice.
mm,
Nice.
mm.
So, Andrew, before we get to specifically your wonderful book, and congratulations, by the way, on the
Thank you.
publications, can you tell us a little bit about your own personal journey to becoming a researcher, and then, how did you get to writing sensation, and what's the fertile ground that's been prepared that's produced this?
Yeah, that's a nice phrase, isn't it? It's a bit, maybe it feels complex and disjointed,
Hmm.
but to me, it all makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, had lots of twists and turns, so I'll keep it, I guess, relatively brief. But so I started off life as a working life as a musician, and I genuinely thought that I would either do that for the whole of my life, which is probably what you do when you're 19. And I thought I would do that for the rest of my life, or I would write a book. But in a way, that feeling isn't so connected to actually writing a book in my 50s.
Funny that it was there, though. I see.
Yeah, I genuinely thought that's what I would do. And to cut a very long and twisty story short, then I ended up as a teacher of music. And and I've always been into sort of more avant-garde music, improvisation, and sort of I suppose rebellious music in the sense that I don't necessarily mean punk rock, although I suppose that was important to me actually growing up, but I mean more sort of seeking to work with a medium in a way which creates new possibilities out of it.
Hmm.
Anyway, then in a roundabout and crazy way, I ended up working in performance sport for quite a long time.
That's quite a difference.
I know, but, so I was really into human performance and kind of what inspired people to do things. And then I got very interested in the role that teachers play in that as a teacher of music, if you like. And so now we were talking about sort of creative pedagogies for encouraging human
Yeah,
performance.
yeah.
And then it wasn't really intentional. I think maybe sometimes in our working lives we get to the point where we think, oh, I think it might be time to go and do something else, and maybe that's just a temporary little blip. And
Yes.
but it just at that very moment of me thinking, oh, maybe I do something else, there was an opportunity to go and work in performance sport, and so I just took it, and I moved to Manchester and went to the velodrome and worked for cycling
Right.
for nearly 3 Olympic cycles,
Wow.
and then carried on working in performance sport and particularly Olympic performance sport right until the end of 2024. So that was all going on for me. But the thing that happened somewhere in between was that I met you. And
Okay.
I met you and David, and I began doing a PhD part time,
Yeah.
and um, so I was at Leeds, and I was with you and David,
So
and
can
then
I just stop you there a minute? What was it about that meeting, or that the two rivers colliding, that changed something in your thinking at that time?
I saw a glimpse of being able to do use rebellious words instead of rebellious notes.
Okay.
I saw a glimpse of that,
Nice.
and I saw a glimpse of being able to kind of deconstruct. I don't mean that. I don't. I mean deconstruct with a small d. I saw a way of deconstructing um, what I thought was going to be expected of me if I was going to do a PhD.
Yeah, interesting.
I'd already started doing some writing, well, definitely I've always been doing writing, but doing some reading, and I was reading some really interesting things to me that were brand new to me, and which was effectively post-structural French continental post-structural philosophy, and thinking, oh, I think these people are doing stuff which is with words in a way, or not necessarily they were doing that. They were encouraging. They might not have been enacting, but they were encouraging a rebellious use of words.
Nice.
So I thought, oh crikey, this is really possible.
Yeah.
Yes. Where will I take it now? Well, I mean, I just say that then through another series of twists and turns, I ended up at the University of Edinburgh to finish my PhD with Jonathan Wyatt and Fiona Murray, and I was continued to think post-foundationally. Just don't worry about the foundations that you think might be there, but just do what you think is right. And the more and more it spoke to what I thought was like a lost creative side of me.
Ah, nice. That's really powerful to me to hear that, the lost creative side of ourselves. So would you say that that was the process that you came to during your PhD to be able to articulate it in that way?
Uh, I think the PhD was actually part of the process.
Yeah.
Like it's just helped me become more of who I am, not the other way around.
Yes.
Yeah, writing the PhD allowed me to find myself again entirely.
Wow.
Like I know that probably sounds grand, but it doesn't mean the. I mean, the PhD's. I mean, it's shocking. You would expect it to be. It was written by someone who'd never written a PhD before. So, but what it was hugely inspiring. And one of the things that you might recall is that I would often be with you and David, and you and David would often play guitars and sing.
Mhm.
And I don't remember ever participating in that. And yet I'd been a guitar player since I was 11 years old.
Yeah.
And so there was something about that having closed off, and then through the process of writing the PhD, just be constantly. I read so much, and was just picking things up and just being constantly inspired. And I did meet somebody along my way who worked in performance sport who'd done a PhD in physiology, and they had asked me about the process, and I said, well, I was about halfway through, and I said, well, it's changed my life in every way. And he was so astonished. So I don't really think of a PhD in that way. I think of it as 3 papers. Yeah.
Uh, yes. And I hear that a lot, the sort of formula for a PhD. And it's
Yeah.
really difficult to break out of that, though, in people's minds. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'm glad that you were able to, the small deconstruct of foundations that allowed you to move in a way and sort of push out the boundaries. Um, so can you sort of take us to how you then took your thesis into a publication, because they're very different documents and you're making this learning along the way, but now to a certain extent, are you even less constrained in writing a book? Is it another level of freedom, or do you feel you have to stick to a sort of a formula for a book?
Oh, I definitely didn't think that. I definitely didn't think that. And because I'd already got to the point where, I wasn't desperate to publish this book. And actually, I think along the way I decided that I would that so I'd amassed quite a lot of poetry over that period, and only a little bit of it appears in the thesis, although it does,
Yeah.
and it got carried over into the book. So I had decided that I was going to try and find somebody to publish a small poetry pamphlet, and I thought, oh, that might be the way. So I definitely wouldn't have gone ahead with the book if I thought I was going to be constrained. I think, in a way, Kitrina, I don't think I had a unique experience, but what happened really was that everyone had told me it was devilishly difficult to publish a PhD because of the huge differences. But at the same time, the struggle that was massively supported by my supervisors at the point of handing in and writing up. Although there was no writing up for me, it was just writing. It was constellating as opposed to writing up. But was that, for example, had taken an approach where I think it ended up much more like a book. So, for example, I hadn't written a literature review, but instead I had absolutely my interlocutors were demonstrable on every single page. It was, but there was no section, and I'd made the point early on in a more challenging conversation with someone who wasn't one of my supervisors that if I had to put all my interlocutors in one section, I was going to put all my capital letters in another section, and I was going to put all of my punctuation in another section, because that's how crazy it sounded to me. Why would that? Why would you do that? Separate them. So consequently, and therefore there was no methodology section because the question would be, what methodology is being acted here? Not here are 10 like glaring signposts on a page, but rather, well, what is being enacted here? That is the methodology. So in a way, it was already it was a bit easier to bring that into a book form. But having said all of that, Kitrina, what I did believe at the start was that I might be able to basically tidy up a few things I was unhappy with and then send the manuscript off. And I was given something like 14 months to do it by loads of wonderful people at Routledge. And I thought, oh, well, this is great because it'll just take me like a couple of weeks probably to do that, and then that would be the lot. And in the end, I sort of rewrote everything, and the material ended up being more like a sort of a donor body for a book, and but again, not constrained, and so I was able to. Like there's no preface, no foreword. The opening, the first thing you'll read if you read it front to back is called the after backwards, because they are. I wrote them after the very back words. It was after that, so the first section you'll encounter is called the after backwards, and they allowed me to mess. I numbered all the chapters based upon how they had formed themselves. So consequently, that was all out of line, and a copy editor along the line did say, this is going to be really confusing for the reader. And I said, well, it could be really inspiring for the reader as well, or it could just be really interesting for the reader. And so in the end, that got left. It wasn't intended to be gimmicky. It was intended to write a book that didn't look like it had been all tidied up, but rather you could see how it was made.
No, I love that about it. And I often myself rile when, I'm thinking back to a recent PhD student of mine, and in the revisions for her doctorate, she's been asked by the internal reviewer to give a summary in each chapter of what the chapter holds. And I just think, why does the reader need that?
Yeah.
Why not come to it and experience something exciting and fresh that you hadn't anticipated, rather than this sort of procedural thing?
Yeah, that really chimes with me. I don't want to speak too much, Kitrina. I'd just say that really chimes with me. I had to do the abstract thing. And it was tricky for me because all along the whole point of writing sensation as a concept was that, if you like, when I had a book launch, which was lovely, friends and colleagues and family, people who would never normally meet all coming together. It's like a wonderful thing, and I would really encourage people to do it. Even if you think, oh, no one's going to come, they will, and the people who come will be really important to you. But someone had asked who I didn't know, what is the book about? And I said, well, it's about you, because it really is about a reader coming into relationship with a with a it's coming into relational encounter with a piece of writing. And so fundamentally it seems to me that very much of writing is about us, not about the author. I'm not talking about the death of the author. I don't mean that as a concept. I mean,
Absolutely.
literally, it's
Yeah.
about how we enjoin ourselves to it. So the idea of writing abstracts that tell a reader what they should take away from something is anathema, really, isn't it?
I mean, I often, I came into a relationship with and Carolyn Ellis's work by going into the Bristol University Library, randomly seeing the qualitative inquiry books or the journals all lined up, opening them and flicking through them and saying, oh, there's a picture there. Oh, it's a woman writing about her relationship with her mother, and delved into that bit at that time.
Mm.
And the same with Kim Etherington's work. I often pick stuff up and start in the middle or start at the back and flick forward to see what catches my eye. So the idea that a reader has to start at a certain place, otherwise it's not going to make sense,
Mm.
doesn't work to my character type, because I,
Yeah.
I generally start in the middle and then I go, oh, well, this is good. What went before this or what went after that?
Yes. Well, I should say there was a point, it happened really at a good point, just in case she ever encounters this, but Sarah E. Truman wrote a book, I think, in 2023, and it's got a really long title like mine, and it doesn't lend itself to remembering very well. But I could attempt some of the words, but I'd just make a mess of it. But she wrote this book, and it came around the time when I was again thinking, how is this going to end up looking on the page? Is this going to be okay? And how much pushback am I going to get from the copy editors? And I opened her book, and there were some of the things that it was published with Routledge, and they have guidelines about things you absolutely may not do. And she transgressed almost every single one on a page. And I had also done that in my draft, and I thought, right, this is going to be okay. So we take those in. I've taken inspiration from so many people. On that, though, I would say maybe we'll talk about it later. But for those interested in doing something with rebellious words, then the copy editing process can take quite a long time. That can feel a little bit. There's a tension to be held there.
That totally resonates with me. I think nearly every journal article I submit, it gets all changed, and
Mm.
then you have to change it all back again. And it's the changing it back again that you miss things. And
Yes.
then that comes back and you go, no.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
it's really difficult to articulate to a copy editor exactly what you're trying to do. And they just say, oh, there's an indent here, so there must be an indent here. And it's like,
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Exactly that. There was a point. There's a few points where, like, I really like sort of visual poetry
yes.
and concrete, and so there's just one particular bit that said it's just a line that ends with taps that drip. And so I think any sensible person in my head would have taps that drip, not taps that drip, because taps don't drip sideways; they drip down. And but I think I got corrected like 3 times. But it now says taps that drip, which is really good. It leaves a lot of space though, and it's really hard for people who are making books to. It's almost like space is one of the things that's hard for typesetters and copy readers to work with. Yeah.
I wonder at this stage, just before we go on to anything else, Andrew, would you read one of your poems or a section from the book for us?
So yeah, I'll read you a bit from the chapter which is called Monstrum, and it comes from sort of an encounter of watching a swimmer, in a performance swimming pool with all the so many people around this one person, I'll read it because when I first, I think one of the very first things I created that I shared with you and David was a very short poem or recital about a swimmer, and it ended up being about an 8,000 word chapter in my thesis from a little poem, and then ended up being what this is. So I'll just read you a little bit of this, and maybe you just tell me when to. A drop of water hits the camera and races to gather at the bottom of the lens. The swimmer pans right to left, then left to right, her feet striking the mathematics of the pool wall: time, t, force, F, velocity, v, inertia, I, and duration, d. Achievements, demands, and targets. Before turning back on herself, Erin Manning tells us that when form becomes information, the body multiplies. The clock counts round, its two hands sweeping through infinite intervals. Her legs flutter, each arm in turn rising in a clockwork arc, hands ticking in synchronicity with the cadence of the moment. One quantizes the other inseparably. Her head is perfectly still, as if she cannot bring herself to look at what is becoming of her body. The swimmer's breath keeps time, withheld, then expelled. Each breath sends out ripples, the eddies, forming diffractive patterns that ready themselves for the inevitable conflict with the pool wall. Smooth meets striation, nomadic forces meet sedentary captures. You know, duration and duress have a shared history. The camera tracks, keeping the swimmer in the centre of the viewfinder. She comes to a stop, the still point of a turning world. Her legs still flutter, her arms linger in their asynchronous dance. She hangs like a new charm on a bracelet. The loud monochrome zigzags of her swimsuit in asymmetrical relations with the black grout and white tiles of the pool. The floor and walls become a three-dimensional graph, and she, a data point, charted across the swell of three axes. An inflection point, the point at which the fold folds, the point at which the event events, is a point in a flow of transpositions. The camera sees a hand as it slices the water, a foot as it arches, flexes and extends. It sees the head as it holds the mouth. It sees the mouth as it holds the breath. It sees the breath as it secretes itself, then is concealed. The line of a spine of a body diagrammed. The little black boxes dissect her as fleshy fragments. She is doll parts and time, sliced up into 1,000 fetishized increments. I'll leave it there.
Wow. I love that extract, Andrew. And I'll tell you why, because those of us that have actually been in professional sport, high performance sport, and our bodies have been that one that's been dissected. It gives us another view to the camera looking us. It gives an extra layer, and really makes me think back to those actual moments of how we tell athletes what they should do next and how to move a foot or an arm. But it also kind of paints the bigger picture, the artistry of what's going on, sort of more generally as well. Fantastic work.
I think it is I do see it as a fetishization, and I wrote it from that perspective. Lots of the what I would say, it is. I use lots of language that was like that. Yeah.
And it's so much taken for granted about how our bodies are photographed and digitized.
Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely is, and yes, and you'll be scrutinized to make sure that you look right as well.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. That's great.
Thanks for letting me.
Um, so can I ask you, what were the challenges of taking it from thesis to book, do you think? How do people manage that journey?
The challenges. So, well, I talked about if you wish to enact particular ideas and concepts, then I think by inaction, I mean that ideas and concepts frequently, perhaps always, I don't know, but frequently have consequences for the way you portray them on the page. And that includes, as I said before, even the use of space, those kind of things. So that is devilishly difficult because so much of I do understand why, but so much of the production process has become automated or assisted by non-humans. And so what we might see as being very difficult creative choices become errors to be corrected. And that's not to say all of my conversations were with really fantastic people, but then here is the other bit that I think is difficult, is that largely you are on your own. That isn't to say that your editor isn't responsive, but you can't be speaking to an editor or to publishers every day, but you probably do need to be doing some writing every day. And so I suppose the flow of writing is something that where, you might think, wow, I had a wonderful day today. And for someone like me, that means 300 words, a wonderful day. Like I'm writing a book, I've started writing another one. And so if I write 300 words, then that is an amazing day, amazing. But it's also got all of these kind of, if you like, built-in editorial decisions that you're not sharing with anybody. And then it comes at the end whereby you sort of hand it over, and then that's where the tensions emerge and the misunderstandings or the need to really convey what you're trying to do. So you didn't ask me for a solution there, but one of the things that I wish I'd had
Yes.
was, I really would take this seriously. I really wish I had have had a group of would-be or in-progress authors.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Where we were not sharing our work necessarily in terms of what we were putting on the page, but just sharing our approaches and our ideas and our challenges. And I think I felt super isolated, and I wouldn't want that again.
That's really interesting. What struck me there is I heard a lovely thing about Oscar Wilde, who somebody asked him, what did you do this morning? And he said, I added a comma. What did you do this afternoon? I took it away.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Kind of gets to the angst of, but what should I do here? And what you said, just especially for most of us, we are on our own, and to have that connection with somebody just to share that would be a big help.
would be, and to know that you're not underachieving. Like your comma is an achievement.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's really wonderful, Andrew. So I just wondered, has the book achieved its aims? Are you pleased with the finished product? What are your hopes for it now, and where is that taking you on your journey?
I could give you a couple of answers to that. So I'll start with the not so good news because there's loads of good news. So I think maybe it's always going to be the case. I think it used to be for me with Piece of Music, but I sort of in some ways see it as a failed project. I set out to try and do something. Particularly, I wanted to do something where I was not trying to represent, but rather, as very kindly, Lisa Matsey, who wrote the foreword to the book, talks about how she feels it lures the reader into a relational encounter, the writing, which is a beautiful thing to say. But at the same time, I see a lot of representation by stealth in there.
Yeah.
The idea of sensation, and I don't mean sensation as in the sense on the skin. It has a very particular meaning, but if you like, human sensation, there are points where it's very clearly has just become evidence of something. Affect gets treated as data. Experience inevitably becomes a unit of analysis all over again. And there is an element of clarity brought by putting the words into one place and putting a cover around them So, that's making things intelligible to people who are not invested in the book. So, in a way, all of the things I set out to achieve, I failed to do. But I suppose that is what always causes you to pick up an instrument or start writing again, isn't it? If it was perfect, I wonder what you'd end up doing.
Mm.
So, in terms of did it, um, so what's happened is that I've ended up with supervising a couple of PhD students who are not at my institution.
Mm.
And that's because they have got in contact and said, I really like your work and I'd like to do something similar, and can you join the PhD team? And that is so fulfilling.
Yes.
And my wife, Karen Kaufman, who some people will know because she's definitely part of the autoethnographic community. So Karen also has had a couple of students who, unbeknown, because we don't share the same surname, have said, I've been reading this and it's really interesting and I think I could do something like it. And that is super. I mean, that's just an amazing thing. And I know that you will have encountered this a thousand times in your academic career, but this is a new thing for me, and so it's astonishing to me. And I was recently invited to do a talk at a postgraduate student research conference, and the book opened the door for that to happen, and again that's hugely rewarding. So it's done in that way. It's done more than I could have ever imagined. Because for someone, it's not definitely not about citations. It's about people coming into encounter with it and saying, "Well, oh, maybe I could do something like this," which is just wonderful. And then, of course, it's been in the world for 18 months. So I should mention the £85 in gross royalties.
So you're not going to retire yet?
Yeah, but but I've put it in a high interest account and see what it can do.
Do you feel like you're a risk taker with your writing?
Uh, oh gosh, what? Yes, yes, yeah, I do because, so there's a couple of elements to that maybe as well. One is I'm thinking about it again in terms of making music as well. That like if you don't do what you want to do, you'll only be unhappy with it. It seems an odd thing to try and create something and put it in the world so other people are happy with it at your expense. That doesn't really make any sense to me.
Nicely put. Yeah.
But also there's about honesty and a way of I talked about Lisa Matsei describing being lured into a relational counter, but actually I think to paraphrase the full sentence says lure or repulsed. And that's because some of the writing is honest about encounters.
Mm.
And so there's a risk, I suppose, in showing who you are or how you are in certain situations and writing about that in an honest and truthful way. It means that you don't come out the other side of the process very shiny, but I think you do still come out with a sense of that you've written with integrity. You've not disguised the parts of yourself which you would rather people didn't know about, because it's almost like just another version of social media. Then well, of course, books are a form of social media absolutely in every way, but you know what I mean. You're adopting the kind of it's an airbrushing, which I wouldn't feel very happy with. But so that's a risk, isn't it? That's a risk as well.
And that's a really, really important point you've just made there, Andrew. And I'm glad you communicated it in a very comprehensive way and gave some thought to that. Showing those bits that we're not happy about, otherwise they're airbrushed, is something for autoethnographers especially to think through. But being vulnerable and taking those risks and feeling alone sometimes is a really difficult position to be in. So,
Mm.
have you any other thoughts or reflections that could guide others as they enter that space of being vulnerable, of being open, of being honest, of presenting a self that they don't perhaps sometimes even like, and how they might manage their mental health and well-being in that space?
Well, I suppose in a way I might have already said it, but so it can be hard to reveal in my case, in my book, my responses to other people, i.e., not a recollection, but a recollection of as you write, you begin to
Yes.
form ideas about moments, and you could choose to dress that up in some way or avoid writing it. I suppose then the question for the writer becomes, it's certainly not for me to make judgments, but is yes, that can make you feel very vulnerable. But if you were to write a book which is freely available to anybody, including the people that you think really might not like it, or might want to, I don't know, depending on the field you're working in, perhaps might even want to take a swipe at your book the minute it comes out. To what extent will you feel vulnerable if you've not written something you're proud of?
Mm.
There's a negotiation there, and the other element of that, there's Levi Bryan, as a writer, writes in a book called Deleuze and Ethics. I think this chapter is in. Myself and Mary Garland, who many people know, she's part of that community. She might even be
Yeah.
there right now. But we'd written with Levi Bryant, and he says that the moment of the ethical is precisely the moment of crisis. And so and what he's articulating there is that, the ethics unfolds from the very moment, the emergencies, the ethical emergencies unfold as pencil hits paper, as fingers hit keys.
Yeah.
And so the question of it isn't just how do we portray situations, but also what are we wanting to convey to people about the very process of writing and inquiring. All of these are ethical decisions to be made. So I suppose from my own perspective, all I can say is that I felt that in many of the encounters, the only ethical thing to do under that particular set of circumstances was to write it like I think it and not try and avoid the ugliness.
Fantastic. Andrew, I'm going to draw our conversation to a close. It's been really, really lovely and enlightening talking to you and hearing about your work. And I wish you and the book every success in whatever form that takes.
Thank you. Thank you, Kitrina. Thanks for wearing a lovely hat and talking to me from the garden. It's lovely, and it's lovely to see you again. Thanks for having me.
And I will just.